What is going on with these college fraternities and sororities? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I wanted to do a little bit of an impromptu video because last night I was researching a bunch of information about the Idaho 4 crimes because I was preparing to do another video. But as I was coming across all of this information about the fraternities, I had to stop and start going through this information because it just seemed like it was right in front of me. It seemed like it just needed to be there, and I needed to take a look at this. So I've definitely done a deep dive into the fraternities and into the sororities that are on campus. But I haven't really picked the whole concept apart. I haven't really broke it down and really looked at it from a common sense point of view. Now, as I'm looking through this information, one thing that I'm keeping in my mind is that what was the one common denominator for everybody who lived in this house? What was the one thing that everybody who lived in this house had in common? It was fraternities and sororities. All 5 of these female roommates were in a sorority. Ethan was in a fraternity. So one thing that they all had in common was that they were all involved in the Greek life. Now, not only were they all in different sororities, and Ethan was in a fraternity, but they also lived right around the fraternity houses and the sorority houses. 1122 King Road is walking distance to Greek Row, basically. So not only were all of the people in this house in these organizations, we'll call them, but they also lived around these organizations. They lived this life. They lived inside of the Greek life. Now, fraternities and sororities there's a lot of tradition that comes along with the Greek life. A lot of these students who want to pledge these fraternities and sororities usually come from a background of family members who have also been involved in the Greek life. Now, it's a big deal for a lot of these students to get into these fraternities and to get into these sororities. You know, think about the pressure of getting into a fraternity. If you know that your dad was in that fraternity, maybe your grandpa was in that fraternity, so it's become a family tradition. So there's a lot of pressure for these students to get into these organizations. Now, a lot of these students would do just about anything to get into these organizations. And last night, as I'm going through all of these stories in the news, things that have been reported in the media, I'm realizing that there's a big problem within these fraternities and these sororities. They have a major problem with hazing and violence within these organizations. Now, if you look through a lot of these news stories, some of these acts are pretty disgusting. A lot of these acts include SA, brothers, fraternity brothers, committing SA on fraternity pledges. There's been a lot of lives that have been lost to hazing. There's been a lot of punishments handed down to fraternities and sororities for hazing. Now, they call them safety concerns, which I guess losing your life is a safety concern. But the more that I'm going through this information, the more I realize that this is a real problem. If you read through some of the comments that are made on these platforms, whether it be Reddit or any of these platforms, any of these open discussion groups, if you read through a lot of these comments, it becomes very apparent very quickly that a lot of these students who are involved in these fraternities and these sororities really, they don't really display a lot of compassion. They don't really talk in a very compassionate manner. A lot of them are very vulgar. Very vulgar. Now, I can't imagine that the parents of these students would be okay with that. I know that I wouldn't want my child representing me by acting in such a vulgar and disgusting manner. But these students continue to act like this. They act out. Why is that? Is it because maybe they're privileged? Is it because maybe mom and dad have some influence in the community? A lot of the money that goes into the University of Idaho comes from alumni. These alumni, many of them are also from fraternities and sororities. See, the benefit of being in a fraternity, other than the partying and everything else that goes along with it, the idea of the fraternity and the sorority was to enable students to make contacts with other people within their organization. So let's say Johnny graduates from the University of Idaho and he's in a fraternity. Well, when Johnny's looking for a job, he's going to fall back on his fraternity brothers. And maybe one of those alumni will be able to give him a job. It's all about making contacts for the future. That's what these fraternities are about. They're kind of disguised as a brotherhood. We're all brothers here, which we know what that's all about. But, they're pushing the idea of brotherhood. I've got your back. You get my back. Now, not all gangs wear bandanas and throw up hand signs. There's a lot of gangs out there that wear three-piece suits and have titles, official titles. It's all the same. It's just a different level. Now, as I'm reading through a lot of these articles about these hazing incidents and, pledges who have lost their lives, because of these hazing incidents. Within these articles is a lot of talk about how the universities have trouble policing these fraternities and sororities. They have problems policing these fraternities and sororities because of the financial impact as well as the power that a lot of these individuals who are in these organizations possess. So if a university is trying to investigate one of these fraternities, say, there's a lot of pushback from the alumni and from other members of this organization. Because of course they want to handle it within themselves. But they're not law enforcement. They're not the law. They are an organization. Maybe a little too powerful of an organization. That's definitely a possibility. Now, in a lot of these articles that I'm reading, they talk about the problems investigating any issues with these fraternities and sororities because of the people who are in power who also represent these organizations. There's been deans of, there's been a dean of students who has basically quit his job because he felt as though the university's hands were tied when it came to investigating these fraternities. Basically, these fraternities and these sororities have the ability to get away with a lot more than, say, a student that's not affiliated with any of these organizations, in my opinion. Now, do the members of these organizations know that? Of course they know that. Of course they know that they're going to get away with things that other students might not get away from. Why? Because maybe their parents paid for the football field, or maybe their parents paid for a hall at the university. It's all about money. It always boils down to money. And that's what this is about. It's about a university's decision to look the other way and allow these organizations to police themselves, which obviously is not working because there's fraternities and sororities all across the country who are having major issues with their students acting out and committing crimes. I've heard a lot of people say, well, the more people that are involved, the harder it would be to keep a secret, and that's very true. That's very true. It would be hard to keep a secret when there's more people involved. But if the organization overshadows these people who are involved, then that really doesn't matter. Because if somebody is to come out and say, this is what happened, this is what really happened, I'm going to clear my conscience and tell you what happened. Then what's going to happen is that organization, which is very powerful, is going to spin that story and make this person look crazy. Because we're just a law-abiding organization. We're about education and brotherhood. We're not about, all this crazy stuff that you hear about. Of course they're going to say that. It's in their best interest to have a public, to have a positive look in the public. It's very important. Now, you're talking about Moscow, Idaho, a town of 25,000 people. Half of those people attend the University of Idaho. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Without this university, this town couldn't make it financially. This town would literally go under without this university. This is a university town. So this town's going to be very careful about where they step because they don't want to damage the reputation of this university and of these organizations, these fraternities and these sororities. Now, it would be very possible that if these Idaho 4 crimes were committed by members of one of these organizations, that could be a big problem because now you have a struggle of power. You have the power coming from this fraternity organization. You have the power coming from the higher-ups at the University of Idaho. And then you have the power of the Moscow Police Department and investigators who are investigating these Idaho 4 crimes. Who has the money? Who, out of all three of these, who's holding the bag? Who has the money? The fraternities, the alumni, the boosters who donate to the University of Idaho. A lot of these parents of these students who are in these organizations are powerful. They hold powerful positions, and they donate a lot of money to these universities. Now, it seems as though fraternities could really kind of squash this hazing problem if they really wanted to. If they really wanted to squash this hazing issue, they could. Because these members of these fraternities are just happy to be there. These organizations control the individuals. You know, the higher ups in these organizations and these fraternities control these fraternity members. It's all about follow the leader. So it wouldn't be difficult for them to squash these hazing issues and these issues that they're having with violence among their members. But they don't. They let it continue. Why is that? Now, a lot of people have said these are just kids. These are just young adults. But these young adults are out there taking lives daily. There's a story right now that just happened a couple of days ago in Las Vegas, Nevada. 8 17-year-olds have been charged with taking one person's life by beating him to death and then leaving him laying in the dirt. That's happening right now. Eight people have been charged in this. It's not uncommon for a group to gang up on a victim or a couple of victims. Happens all the time. It's power in numbers. So, let's say, hypothetically, if these fraternity, if some of these fraternity members committed this crime and took the lives of these 4 students in this house, likely, in my opinion, there's going to be a cover-up. You're dealing with some very powerful people who have money. The university needs money. The universities always need money. It's always, it's a huge business. And they rely on their alumni. So it's a very tricky situation because for a university to go after one of these fraternity organizations, it's basically biting the hand that feeds them. Now, half of the budget of Moscow, Idaho comes from this university. That budget includes paying law enforcement officers. It includes paying public defenders. It includes paying a lot of these people involved, investigators. You have to follow the money. You know, a lot of people believe that justice is blind, but it is not. The reality of our justice system is that the more money that you have, the more justice that you're going to be able to afford. And that's just the reality of things. The more money that you have is going to be favorable for you within the justice system. That's just the way that it is. And that's a fact. Now, these college students, do I believe that these kids would be able to commit these types of crimes? Absolutely. Absolutely. After reading through their comments and seeing their correspondence, yeah, I believe that these kids could possibly commit these types of crimes. Now, everybody seemed to be at this party. You know, apparently Bethany was at this party at Sigma Chi. Ethan and Xana were at this party at Sigma Chi. But you know who wasn't there? Kaylee and Maddie. Kaylee and Maddie went off and did their own thing. They didn't go to this big Sigma Chi party. Why is that? Why did they decide to go off and do their own thing? Is it possible that the Sigma Chi members maybe didn't want them there? I mean, that's a possibility, but why? Why wouldn't they want them there? You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that Kaylee returns home for an event with Dylan to be her +1 for a sorority event. These victims, their whole lives, these victims and the surviving roommates, their whole lives were surrounded by the sorority life and the Greek life, the fraternity life for Ethan. If crimes were committed that involved fraternity members or sorority members, it would make a lot more sense as to why Bethany and Dylan may not have called 911. They're loyal to these organizations. I just think that it's the one common denominator among everybody surrounding these crimes. You know, I found it kind of strange that when I was watching the interview with Ethan's mom and dad, she really seemed to be pushing, kind of overdoing it a little bit, pushing this idea of the Greek life and the family and, you know, being surrounded by people who care and the family life. We know these organizations are a whole lot different than what they put out to the public. But she was really pushing this narrative about the family of all of these individuals. And these organizations, Ethan's brother is in a fraternity. He's a Sigma Chi member, which is very strange to me. Ethan's sister is in a sorority. Now, there's rumors that there was a fight the night that these crimes occurred, that there was a fight between a Sigma Chi member and Ethan, who's also a Sigma Chi member, a fight between two brothers in this fraternity. Now, maybe that fight didn't end at the fraternity house. Maybe it carried over. People were drinking. Ethan and Xana were described as drunk. Kaylee and Maddie were obviously very intoxicated. The individuals in this house had been drinking that night, partying that night. Who knows what could have happened at the Sigma Chi house between Ethan and one of his fraternity brothers, or a number of his fraternity brothers. There's a rumor that Xana got involved as well. So now Ethan and Xana are involved in a fight at the Sigma Chi fraternity house, and then hours later, their lives are taken. That seems like law enforcement would really want to look into these issues. But law enforcement cleared all these people immediately. Cleared all of them. They're all cleared. I mean, they just had a fight a few hours earlier. Might want to look into that. As I've said before, there's a hierarchy to these things. And when it comes to government, there's a definite hierarchy. A lot of followers, a lot of people who are going to do what their higher ups tell them to do because they want to keep their job. And that's their career. So I've said this before. I believe that law enforcement knew exactly what they were walking into. I believe as soon as law enforcement walked into this house, they knew the situation that they were dealing with. Is it possible that law enforcement and maybe the University of Idaho, maybe the Sigma Chi fraternity, is it possible that they're all working together to get out of this with the least amount of damage possible? Is it possible that they would cover things up in order to facilitate some of these big organizations on campus not bite the hand that feeds them? I think it's definitely a possibility. This is all just information that I was looking through last night. I've had this information for a long time, but last night, I don't know why, when I started looking through it all, things just started clicking. And things just started to make a lot more sense with regards to these fraternities and these sororities. This really needs to be looked at. Now, stay tuned for my next video, the video that I was actually doing research to make when I came across all this information. But stay tuned for my next video, and please like and please follow my channel. I really appreciate y'all, and I'll see you next time.